So thank you all so much. We're going to get started second half of our program, or second third of our program. We'll get to the third half of our program later. This is all about, we're going to talk about recycling. So I know my first two guests are Alex Danovich and Chris Goodwin. So excited to have you both here. And now we have Brian. Oh, McCarty. Also, very excited to have you. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm trying to just think where exactly to start with this, which is just sort of, thank you very much, recycling. I think that, could we just do another sort of defining terms of, like, when we say recycle, how are we thinking about that in, separation? How is that different than composting, reducing, reusing? What do we actually mean by recycle, I guess, which sounds overly simple, but I think probably it's more complex than we give it credit for.
Well, yeah, there certainly are a lot of angles and aspects to it, but when it comes right down to it, in order for something to be recyclable, you really have to have enough of it that you can collect it up, aggregate all of it together into a big enough pile that you can then ship to some other market that is going to manufacture it into a new product. But I think that's like the basics of it. But when you get to the next level, really why you're doing that, why you're choosing to have recycling, can really have a huge impact on how you end up doing it. And so the values and the reasons and the goals that you're trying to accomplish by collecting it can be influenced. If you're just trying to do it to get it off the street, you're going to make decisions differently than if you're trying to increase local economic development, have living wages, and benefits for employees and healthcare and things like that, and working with local markets. So why you're doing the recycling is a really important question, because it leads to answers to all the questions of, okay, now how do we go about accomplishing it?
Wait, can you say more about why those are different? I mean, I don't know, maybe it's because I was raised by a Lutheran minister, but I've often been raised just like that, if you do a good thing, it's a good thing. Like, you could get tricked into it. You could do it because there's somebody watching you at all times, like an elf. But whatever it is, as long as you're doing the good thing, that's probably good. There good intentions. Who cares? I apologize to my Lutheran pastor father, because that is almost certainly not what he taught me. But so why does it matter?
I think one of the reasons that it matters is because you're asking somebody to take an action. And if you're asking them to do it, you need to give them a reason why it's worth their time and energy to do it in the first place. So if you say, well, we need you to do that because some company can make a lot of profit out of it. I don't know how many people are going to take the time to do the extra step if you're just generating profit for some third party. But if you're saying we'd like you to recycle and collect these things because if you don't, it goes in the waste and there's consequences to that, and here's what they are. And if that's enough, great, you've done it, you're on board. But here are the additional benefits that come along if you make that action and take that, that step. You're creating local economic development, you're preventing pollution, you're doing positive things for the environment. All those things are potential motivations for whoever it is that you're asking, and everybody's motivated by different things. So in order to be able to give people the reasons why they should take the action, you have to give them why it matters to them.
What about, is the reason, well, everybody else is doing it and I don't want to be different? Is that a good enough reason? There are children in the audience. Go ahead.
If it gets you to do it, but I think if that's the reason they're doing it, then maybe what they're asking really by saying that is, can you please tell me why it should be more than that? So they might say, yeah, if I don't do it, my neighbors give me the stink eye. But okay, you don't want to feel like you don't understand why you're doing it for any other reason than that, then here's some reasons why it's beneficial.
Okay, so can we just sort of, I know you mentioned, and I'm really interested in this question of markets for recyclables and where they go, but just even a half step before that, is it physically possible to recycle anything right now?
I think technically it could be physically possible to recycle anything if you were not concerned about the economic viability of it or the social impacts of that. But I think Lynn or Kate was earlier talking about, when you look at the composition of the waste stream, the vast majority of what we consume and discard of is recyclable in our current systems in the Twin Cities. So our bottles, cans, newspaper. What makes that recyclable is that there's robust markets that want to use that material to actually make new products with it. So, there's paper mills that are using this paper to make new products, and that's reducing our need to extract new resources to make these products. So, when we look at, there's a lot of new, Go-Gurts that you guys were talking about. It's like people want to recycle their Go-Gurt, and sometimes they'll put it in their recycling bin because they really want it to be recyclable. We call it wish cycling. But at the end of the day, if there isn't a company that wants to buy that material from us after we collect it, sort it into a stream, and gather enough of it up, if there's no one wants to buy that and use that to make a new product, then we don't call that recycling. So there needs to be demand for the material.
So we already talked a little bit about the things that are recyclable. What are those wish cycled things? What are the things that you sort of most commonly see folks really, either they really want to recycle or they think are recyclable and we're all wrong about it? And can you just sort of talk through how does that play out?
Sure. Well, I mean, I want to, I think there's a lot of times it's these little things that we're buying, and people are get really obsessed with the fact that they like Go-Gurts and they really want to see Go-Gurt recycled. But it's like tubs. I mean, not tubs. I'm sorry. Like tubes, pouches, flexible packaging like chip bags and film. These are things that our current recycling infrastructure and systems that we've invested in aren't able to handle with recycling. There are, we talked about extended producer responsibility for certain materials like mattresses, paints, that the counties and the cities run to have special collection programs for. But within our recycling infrastructure, it was designed to capture these materials that are really prevalent and have been used over the years that have demand for these markets, and these new products like chip bags and that producers are coming out with they're pushing these products out without consideration of the recyclability of it, and they're expecting oftentimes that the recyclers are going to figure out how to add the material instead of considering, is this a material that can be recycled in our current infrastructure before they start manufacturing it.
So here in the Twin Cities, how does it work, I guess, for folks who are here from the Twin Cities in terms of the actual recycling programs? And I think that this is different just sort of if you're in Minneapolis or St. Paul, and if you're in Eden Prairie or Edina. And I'm curious because, again, I remember Minneapolis switched to single sort recycling. And then I think that probably increased wish cycling, because then everybody was like, oh, I just throw everything in there now. Yay. And they didn't think about, oh, wait, this tube is recyclable and this one isn't. So can you just sort of, again, behind the scenes, everything gets thrown into, if you're in Minneapolis, one of these big blue bins, and then what happens?
Yeah, so recycling starts at the curb. Brian collects recycling. We got an expert on stage. But once we pick up that material from your curb and it goes in the truck, that's just the start of the process. That's not recycled. We don't just magically make it disappear. So once it goes in your truck, it gets tipped on at our facility, that material recovery facility, where we have humans and machines that work together to sort out material.
That's so harmonious. Humans and machines working together.
That's right.
We are heading off the Matrix doomsday.
And so we at our facility, all we do is sort this material, densify it, and then we send it to other places where they use that material to make it into a new product. And sometimes there's even another step, like plastics, for instance. We'll go from our facility to another facility where it's washed, the labels are removed, they grind it up, and then they sell that material to another person that actually uses that feedstock to make a new product.
So when you're, everything is, a lot of what we're talking about now is sort of single sort now, single stream, is that sort of the correct terminology? So how long have you been doing this? I know you just showed up on stage, so I don't have any background for what to ask you. So just how long have you been doing this?
I've been with Eureka for about 2.5 years now.
2.5. And so have you seen it change over that time?
Absolutely.
What have you seen change?
Well, first we got a new fleet of trucks.
That's nice.
So that was really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, we went from, picking up the blue bins on the curbside to the rollout carts.
Right.
And that happened this past January, of course.
And so how does that change what, because I think that we said in the earlier piece, there's a disconnect often between the folks who actually are doing the work. You know, a lot of us take something to the curb and then, we stop thinking about it. And so you're a link in the chain that we don't actually get to talk to very often. So what happens then? What is it like, I guess, in terms of now you're driving around and you're collecting this stuff?
Well, it's a lot different process. So basically our trucks are more mechanical now than they were in previous. So we're going and we're basically just going to the curb and alleys, and that's a different step. We didn't have alleys before. So we're just going and we're picking up. Occasionally people will come out and they'll say things like, can this be recycled? And that needs to be addressed, I think. There's a lot of questions out there about what's recyclable and what's not.
Do you know? Do you have like a cheat sheet, or do you just?
Yeah. There's a cheat sheet and everything. You know, it's.
This is sort of a tangent, but what's the weirdest one somebody's brought you?
Like item to be recycled?
Yeah, they're like, I don't know, is this recyclable?
The only thing that can come to mind is wine cork. You know.
Is that recyclable?
I don't believe it is.
Oh.
I think that it's been remade too many times to be recyclable.
Oh.
It's a great art project reuse item.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
On. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. All of this, though, not you, but this piece about all these steps in the recycling is making me feel bad about recycling now, which I used to feel good about, because it seems like there's all these steps and it's so much work, and I'm sorry.
These steps, though, are what is creating all this jobs and economic development opportunities. So instead of just dumping all this material into a big pile, burying it or burning it, now we have all of these people that are able to be employed. And hopefully, you know, at Eureka, we're committed to these jobs being good green jobs where they're living wages with health care and paid time off. And so that's the huge impact that we have from this collection of this material.
Is it profitable then, recycling? And I ask that in part because I know that there have been changes in some of these markets, right? I believe, I know plastic bags are terrible, and I never, except that I get a newspaper, and the newspaper sometimes, if it's raining, comes in a plastic bag. And so I have plastic bags, and I used to be able to take them to my co-op to recycle them, and they've stopped taking them now. And it's because I think the nonprofit that was picking them up just basically said, we can't reuse these anymore. The market has collapsed under these. And I think that's are things like that happening? Does that happen?
I mean, markets fluctuate. It's a global commodity. Like all commodities, the markets go up and down. And that's why, it goes back to what materials can be recycled. It's like, we need to know that there's robust, multiple demand for material before we add it to a recycling program, so that people are confident that what they put in the recycling bin is getting recycled and not ending up.
And I think there's also the aspect of it that, again, if you're just looking at it purely from a bottom line profit perspective, then all you care about is that commodity price and how much it costs you to get it to market and what you could make off of that. But this also comes back to the why are you recycling in the first place? There are benefits to recycling that go far beyond just what am I going to get paid, what am I going to get paid? It's all the benefits to the local economy, it's all the benefits to the environment. And you would take that in aggregate, and it really balances out that impact that, well, what am I going to get paid for it has, because you see the overall environment, the overall benefit that it has to the community, and that really changes the conversation back to where it really kind of belongs, which is, why are we doing this?
So that sounds amazing to try and get folks to think differently about that. I guess it's a question of how do you start to do that, right? It was, in a lot of cases, I think folks are like, oh my gosh, I just finally, got my neighbor to stop throwing all of their milk jugs into the garbage and put it into the recycling instead, so I didn't have to go over Friday at 4 a.m. and do it for them. And now you're saying I have to change their mind about it too? Like I need to have them, I need to develop a value structure for them? How do you start to do that?
Yeah, I think it's not so much about changing their mind, like they think this and we need them to think this. I think it's adding to their mind. It's adding to all the different perspectives because yes, you get paid for it. So there's a dollar amount, but you're also creating a job, and the same people who care about how much money you get paid for are also people who want jobs. And so then you add, and on top of that, you have this environmental benefit, and all of that added together is just more and more and more of a case. So it doesn't really make sense to rely on one single thing, that if it can't win or lose on that one element, then it's not worth doing. Then 90% of everything we ever do wouldn't be worth doing. It's really...
Oh, God. I'm sorry. No, you're saying that that's not the case. 90% of the things we do are worth doing.
Right, because there's multiple reasons why we do them beyond just, are you going to give me $5?
No. I want to just, again, we're going to open it up for audience questions, but I wanted to just ask you one very technical thing, which is if you're interacting, other than folks coming up to you and saying, is this recycled? Is there anything that you wish just everybody knew that would make your job easier, the actual work that you do? You wish that there was one thing that would change or be different?
If I could have one thing, that's hard.
You can pick two if you want.
Really? All right. So sometimes there's a language barrier. And so like communicating with somebody about what's, acceptable and what's not acceptable, is a little bit challenging, just to be honest. And so, I wish the language barrier and, understanding, or education would be different. Otherwise, having the cart in an accessible location would be nice.
Yes.
It's a big picture thing and a very tangible thing. Yeah. All right, brilliant. I'm going to open it up for questions. I want to try this is a thing that we do in our show, the Theater of Public Policy, and I think that might be valuable here because I want to make sure that we're getting questions from a wide variety of folks, not just the folks who came here ready with the question. So I want to give everybody a chance to practice. So what I'm going to have you do is if you will turn to the person next to you, ask them a question that you actually would like to ask our recycling panel here. You'll have a chance to rehearse a little bit and make a friend. Okay, ready, set, test out your question now.
That's right.
I kind of don't feel like I should be up here.
Yeah.
I kind of don't feel like I should be up here. No, this is genius. You guys had a lot of good things.
I really wanted to get into it.
All right, if you have a question, oh, hooray! Oh no, you're sitting alone. Okay, we got a question right here. If you have the next question, raise your hand and I'll come towards you.
So I've
Yeah, you just got to talk right
okay.
real loud.
So I've worked with Eureka for zero waste events, but I know that there are some societies that actually have gotten to the point of almost zero waste in Europe. Are these because of how does that occur? How does that ever become possible? Like that sounds like utopia. But these things do exist in the world, that they have gotten to the point where they are now outsourcing garbage from other places to put it through their streams to then keep up the jobs and to keep up this amazing industry that they have been able to create. So it is possible, but like, how did that become where it is? And is this a myth? Because you reread everything that's fake news now too. So
Yeah.
Are there places that actually have achieved or are getting close to zero waste?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's examples of businesses and communities that have gotten darn close to zero. And I think maybe what you're alluding to is that sometimes they're invested in a waste infrastructure. They have no more waste to actually feed their own burners, which is a huge issue in terms of what we invest in and really making sure that we're not, we're moving our investments towards a zero waste society and not locking ourselves into a wasting paradigm. But I think, in terms of that question in regards to a recycling panel, I think it's important that, for us, recycling for zero waste is different than recycling. We're not trying to to maximize diversion. I think it's really about getting the benefits of zero waste from every step of the recycling process. So how we collect the material to make sure that we're able to maximize the environmental impact, use that for the highest and best use, how we treat our employees as we're doing this work, how we market material to local markets so that we can get more local economic development and job benefits are all important parts of a zero waste paradigm that we can get through recycling. But we're not going to be able to recycle ourselves to zero waste. Recycling can't do it alone. Recycling can't be a justification for our continued habits of consumption, and recycling can't be a justification for manufacturers to put toxic materials into their packaging. So it's really key that recycling for zero waste keeps all of these focuses in mind and doesn't just count on diversion.
Okay. Oh, look at all these hands. I saw this person right here first. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Are there incentives for small businesses to recycle and to reduce waste in the state of Minnesota?
So there are certainly a lot of county and city and nonprofit organizations that want to support businesses to do recycling. I think there was a lot of work done to have the first recycling requirements for small businesses, where if you generate over a certain amount of trash, you have to also have recycling. I think the benefits to the small business itself is when you start looking at how much money you save when you're not paying to have things hauled away as trash, and all the taxes and all the things that you pay on your trash. So the more you recycle, the more you compost, the more cost effective it becomes. So you have this financial benefit too. And I think folks like Andy and other people who run businesses around here who do that, you can talk to them about what that incentive is.
Okay, there were like 3 hands in this area. Okay, right here. I'll come over here.
Yeah, it's sometimes seemed to me that the rules involved with recycling sometimes limit people's participation. How impractical or ridiculous is it to say if it's metal, plastic, paper, you can recycle it and we'll sort it out ourselves? I mean, is that just an impractical way to approach recycling, or would that maybe increase participation and jobs?
I think it's interesting. We do a lot of tours of our facility where groups from the community, other businesses can come and actually watch the recycling process happen in our material recovery facility. And one of the huge things that happens for those folks is they sort of have a little bit of that sort of perspective when they come in is, why does this need to be this complicated? Isn't there ways that we can just simplify this at the processing facility level or at some other level? And a lot of times then touring the facility and seeing these things that we say we don't want you to put in there, when they get to the facility and the impact they actually have on the people who work there or on the mechanics of the equipment, they do an instant like, oh my. When they see that plastic bags coming into the MRF, they think it's a plastic bag. What? Then they see that 2 hours a day we have to shut down the facility, and a human being with a box cutter in their hand has to climb into this piece of equipment and slice all of that plastic film away. It changes their perspective because they can see what the human impact of, if the system isn't set up to take that, you know. Right, and I think that gets back to something that Alex said at the beginning, is technically every single thing can be recyclable. It's a matter of what would you have to invest in order to be able to make that possible. And if you invested there, it costs this much with this much resources required to make it happen. But if instead you said, let's go over here upstream and prevent that thing from existing in the first place, how much more efficient and environmentally beneficial it is to say, let's be more conscious of what we're making and how we're making it before it gets to the end of the pipeline. So a lot of times the waste that's generated, the person who that responsibility lands on is consumer and post-consumer. You have no control over how that product was designed and manufactured, yet you hold the responsibility. You have it in your hand when it becomes waste. And so the idea is, the analogy that I use in terms of making a distinction between a zero waste approach and a waste-based approach is, let's say we hear a bang sound and water starts pouring out of this vent right here. We have really, really smart people in this room. We can come up with a system like boom, boom, boom to make sure that the carpet's not even getting wet. We're so efficient at picking up all this water and making sure it happens. That's a really good system. We can put a lot of resources towards making that happen. A really, really, really smart person will go upstairs and turn off the water. And the difference is in between zero waste and integrated solid waste management is what that is don't assume that you're going to be stuck with that pile. Ask the question why. Ask the question, how can that pile go away before I'm standing here wondering why I can't put this in my recycling bin? Maybe it shouldn't exist in the first place, or it should have been designed so it could.
Okay, I got one. Yay! I got a question. This is our last question on recycling. So right here, yeah.
So, I just came back from living in Switzerland, so I'm really used to a different system of recycling. You pay by the bag of your trash, and you have recycling centers where you can bring practically anything. And for some things, you pay if it has to be burned. Other things, you separate already yourself. There's little recycling centers as well where you can separate different colors of bottles, cans, aluminum, you name it. Would something like that be plausible here in the United States?
Ooh, that's I want you to answer that. I just want to sort of preview that the after lunch, our whole panel is about sort of enacting political change and some of those kinds of things. So we'll definitely be getting to some of that in the second half. But do you have thoughts about whether, really changing the system would work here?
I keep losing my mic. They absolutely that it's plausible. I think does the political will exist, and can we move towards changing those systems to really, like Chris was saying, have producers be responsible for what it is and not just keep putting it on the backs of communities to figure out how to add it to their recycling programs makes a lot of sense.
Okay, on that note, a big round of applause for our amazing recycling panel. Yay! Hooray! All right, now I'm going to switch panels here. So we're going to talk about compost. Yay! Right before lunch, all about compost. So Lynn Hoffman is coming back up here, joined by Chris Gray, with special guests Michael Cheney and Patsy Parker. Yay! Big round of applause. Come on down. I love it. Nobody else has brought a prop yet. That's fantastic. Come on down. Yeah, have a seat. Oh, do we need to take one more?
And Kelly, you forgot to say Kelly Kish.
Oh, did I not say Kelly? Oh yeah, Kelly Kish. Sorry, you are the second line of my thing, and I missed it. So, and I'm so used at this point to folks just like hopping up on stage. So, all right. Oh, okay. Again, I sort of regret starting in such a basic way, but I do. We've actually been already talking about composting in a couple different ways here. I want to ask, what is composting? And particularly, I want to ask sort of in a couple different tiers, because I think for a long time, I've been composting at home for a long time, and people just thought about it as, I have a thing in my backyard where I put everything and I make dirt. Now we have in Minneapolis city composting, which is a slightly different thing. So I'm wondering if you can talk about what is composting generally, and then how do we think about it in terms of that individual level versus maybe more of a systems piece? And whoever wants to start.
All right, so composting, or otherwise known as organics recycling, Eureka, we kind of prefer the composting term. It's anything that was once alive, like a plant or animal, becomes a nutrient-rich soil amendment through decomposition and microbial action. So there's the backyard, like you said.
Why don't you all like organics recycling?
I feel like it's kind of confuses recycling and organics recycling.
Sounds a little like Soylent Green.
Yeah, so if you just call it something, composting, that sounds a lot differently than including the word recycling in it.
So we get sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That is good. Yeah.
And as a recycler, when there's education out there saying, like, recycle your chicken, we don't want the chicken in the recycling.
That's a good reason. Yeah.
So
Okay.
you got your backyard, where you put your food scraps and leaves. It can be just a pile in the corner of your yard, or you could have a wooden box, with chicken wire, or you could go fancy with the big, crank on the side of it. But eventually, it'll all become dirt. There's also worm composting, which is totally another
Vermiculture.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get into the commercial composting, like Minneapolis, the citywide program. But with that, you can include more material, so stuff you wouldn't want to put in your backyard, like meat, dairy, and then also the compostable packaging, the bioplastics, like the forks that are made with corn.
And I'm curious because I've wondered about this. So why can I put a chicken bone into the city composting and I can't put it into my backyard?
So the site that it goes to is they keep it more keep the pests out. So you wouldn't want to put it in your backyard composter just because there's rodents and things that would get into it. Where the commercial composting, they keep all that out.
Can I jump in too?
Yeah.
So the other piece of it is your backyard bin is not going to get hot enough and stay hot enough for long enough to make sure that the pathogens in your meat, bones, dairy products, whatnot, are going to be neutralized and that it will fully break down into compost. So the commercial composting facility, the piles are 10 to 12 feet wide, 10 to 12 feet tall, and 150 feet long. They are massive, and they stay about 140 to 170 degrees for like a month and a half straight. So
can we talk about then here in the Twin Cities how composting as a system is working, and particularly with Minneapolis, rolled out this citywide composting system, what now, 2 years ago? Maybe not even that long ago. I'm just curious, sort of, we've already alluded a little bit how that happens. How's it going? I mean, is it working? Should we be proud of it? Or is it, how do we feel about this?
Well, so we have a little more than 43% participation. Program's a little over a year old. Citywide rollout, a little more than a year old. And that's about 46,500 households. So it's going very well. But I want to have these two talk about the more exciting piece of composting. The citywide program, we like to call it a supplement to what they are doing in the community. And it is for people who are potentially too lazy to be doing backyard composting or composting at a community. They need the ease and the convenience, and they're not willing to do something that is even more beneficial. So I'm going to pass it on to you guys.
North Minneapolis is going green. Give us a call and learn what we mean. Where once lie urban blight, now sits luscious garden sites, gardens without borders, classrooms without walls, architects of our own destinies, access to food, justice for all. My name is Michael Cheney. I am an activist and organizer. And in 2010, when North High came under attack, myself, Patsy, and a bunch of other folks, we approached the school to talk about reform. And I think that that's really the core of what we really are talking about when we talk about recycling and everything is, do we follow like lemmings to the sea and follow just the prescribed prescription, or do we as individuals in the community, do we take our own destiny into our own hands and come out with systems that are, number one, local in origination?
So can you talk, what is it that, I'm so inspired, and yet I don't know exactly to what. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Yes, I can talk about what we do. My name is Patsy Parker, and I'm a composter. And I want to talk about, this is community composting, okay? This is a collard green that we grew in our garden, that we came from our compost. What we do is called small site composting. So there's the big commercial sites, there's your backyard, and in between, something that's the size of a tractor trailer or smaller is considered small site. So we can take chicken bones, we can take vegetable matter. We're now picking up, this is the story, we're picking up from Worth Co-op. We're actually getting money. We actually have an employee, which is great. And that, yes, he's in the front row. And we, our goal is to keep the nutrients in the neighborhood. I'm glad that you can send your stuff to Roseville or wherever we send it to, but I think we should be having all of our compost from North Minneapolis stay in North Minneapolis, so we don't have to drive so far. So we make compost in big pallet-sized bins. The compost works really great. We put it in the ground. We put these little tiny collard plants in the ground. Everybody thought they were going to die, and this is the size of their leaves. Our compost gets sold at Worth. It goes 3 miles as opposed to 1,400 miles. We have 10 stalks to a stem. They have 8 at Cub. So we're cheaper, we're closer, we're fresher. And to me, that's what zero waste is about. I mean, I think that zero waste can be a thing that's just a silo, but zero waste needs to be wide. It needs to be something that everybody thinks about. I need to be able to talk to explain compost to the drunk guy in the street. You should be able to do that in 2 minutes, you know? You need to be able to talk to the person who's walking by who's like, and 2 years ago, nobody knew what compost was. This year, everybody knows what compost is, you know? And they say, oh, is that a compost bin? And they say, yeah, it is, you know? And so this information needs to become part of this community, part of your neighbors. I think it's important to both think about where paper clips come from, but also talk to your neighbor about paper clips. I pick up every paper clip I see, you know, but, you know, and I put them in my pocket, and then I have pockets full of dirty paper clips, but it goes with everything else that's in my pockets, you know. And so I just think it's really important to be talking to people. And, you know, if I don't know the language, we need to find the people that know the language. And those people that know the language, they're starting to do that at the city. You know, they have a great thing on how to recycle, how to use the organics. And it is a picture of every single community in every single language. And so we need to support that. We need to think that that's how zero waste, that's how composting is going to go. And Michael wants to say something.
I just want to say, I mean, it's great that we've got a municipal program in place, but that was really the beginning of really where we started to push back at it. Because under the guise of reducing the carbon footprints, let's look at the logic of that. We set our organic waste on the corner, it's bussed out to some suburb, and then we, as city residents, get to buy it back. I mean, that is ludicrous. That's like blood diamonds. That's our black gold that can go. And so at the core of this whole thing about the cycle, first of all, if you look at it, even the Minnesota Food Charter, they've got composting as disposed. So in essence, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We look at it differently. We've changed the whole paradigm. For us, composting is the first harvest. And so we've got to really change these perceptions about what waste is and what is valued. And for us, even the employment process of getting people in our community who are wasting away their lives when we could have them engaged in employment, keeping that in our community. That's the policy that makes sense.
Since you're sitting right here, Kelly, I feel like I should give you a chance to talk about the city program in the sense of I'm guessing you're here, and so you know the idea of folks composting themselves is really good. So the theory of the citywide program is to increase the number of folks who have access to it, or maybe, as we heard it for a different thing, it's a gateway drug to becoming your own composter. Just talk us through the impetus of the city program, and then how we actually start to get more people doing the kind of work that we're seeing with this program.
Thank you. I want to say I did not mean to call people who use the city program lazy. goes back to the convenience and where, we talked about, needing to not have limitations or things that prevent you from recycling or reducing your waste or, bringing your electronic to a drop-off site where you have to pay money to get rid of it. It goes back to, some people don't have time, they don't have energy, they don't have resources to have a backyard compost pile or to go to a community garden. So it is helping eliminate some of those barriers for people who otherwise might not participate in the program. So I lost the second part of the question.
So how do we sort of, I guess, have you seen then composting grow? Like, are more people in Minneapolis composting? And then how do we keep that momentum going then?
So we do still have, there are new people signing up for the city program every single day. We always encourage people to do backyard composting in addition to participating in the city program. Ideally, we will be able to make some changes in the future so that the truck isn't just picking up the food scraps, but it'll be picking up something in addition to that. So it is a lesser vehicle out there. But the biggest piece that we've been talking about is reduction. We heard the reducing your wasted food. And as I believe it was Kate earlier had mentioned, when people do participate in recycling and they participate in organics recycling, composting, they are able to look at the overall waste stream and they do make changes. As to one of my favorite analogies is the bag of oranges that's in that netting. So they, buy oranges in the bag, the netting bag, and then they discover, well, I have to put that netting bag in the garbage. So the next time I buy oranges, I'm just going to go buy 3 oranges. And hopefully they won't put them in a plastic bag at the grocery store either, because that one drives me absolutely insane. See the person with 1 bell pepper of each color in an individual plastic bag? That then, here's the best part, when they bring it to their house...
fainting in the audience. Ah!
When they bring it to their house, they leave it in the plastic bag and put it in their refrigerator, which actually makes it go bad faster. So just skip the bags, people. You're going to wash it anyway. Just put it in the dang cart. So there's a lot of... this all comes back to behavior change, and it takes time. And right now we are with composting, organics recycling, where we were with regular recycling 40 years ago. So increasing the knowledge and awareness and eliminating barriers to participating is step 1. And as it becomes the norm, the hope is more people will go back to doing things themselves and being able to really take control of their waste stream.
Okay, and because do you want to jump in? Because we're almost out of time, but I had one last piece. But do you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, you're good. Just
is it okay? We'll just yell. Which I think, let's see, what was Kelly just saying? I had an idea about, infrastructure, right? So it's about, as we're setting programs up for a community, as cities are doing this, it's about scalability. So one of the traps that we get into is building like anaerobic digesters. There's a lot of choices. So this picture in your program is meant to show that you can really make choices about how you compost that really close the loop and really work towards zero waste. And there are places all along designing a program where you can kind of leak out some of the nutrients, right? Or nutrients, the benefits and the nutrients, about what you put in the compost, what kind of ordinances you have in place in your community to make it easy to keep that compost clean so then we don't have plastic in our soil that gets in our water and our bodies, how you collect it, where it goes. And that processing piece is important. If you spend a lot of money investing in big infrastructure, it's just like investing in a big incinerator. You're going to need, you build the beast, you've got to feed it. If you build these big magic boxes that make things go away, or these anaerobic digesters can be an important tool, but they can create energy and leach a lot of the nutrients out, and you end up with something called digestate that doesn't really help to grow more food. So
digestate, another word that will be on the quiz.
Digestate. Yeah, right. So there's just there are important factors when you're shooting for zero waste. Generally, I think across the board today, it's like zero waste is kind of far away. So you can look like you're headed in the general direction unless you really take all these factors into consideration, because by the time you get there, you'll see that you might have gotten in your own way. So when we're building these programs, it's really important to think about scalability and community access and what are our real goals. Our real goals aren't to get the food out of this pile and into this pile. Our goals are to create healthy soil and food security and cleaner water. And if we're always keeping that in mind, we're going to make the right decisions about how we design these compost programs.
I think you missed one of the most in the first place is if we're really going to change we've got to popularize this whole environmental issue. You know, I mean, for far too long, it's been part of the gated community, you know, of the elite who really controlled the narrative and who did not allow very few people to enter. And then we're surprised that people from marginalized communities, that they've been excommunicated, you know, that they're not on board, that they're not participating. That is by the design and the engagement process. And so until we really start talking about engagement, until we really start talking about stewardship, you know, we got to leave behind this capitalist model of ownership to really start talking about stewardship. And if we're all stewards, and if we make this a populist issue, that in time, every human being. That's why gardening is so important, because that allows us all, that's the gateway that you refer to. If you grow the food, you know the food, you'll start changing your health habits and practices. So we're starting, and the paradigms and the infrastructure we're creating are all out of place. And we have to really start figuring out, how do we get people into the equation? How do we bring every neighbor and make gardening and composting as every day as breathing? Until we got that, we will continue to see the erosion of Mother Earth.
The other thing that I wanted to say, as soon as you start composting, what you do is you start to see the whole world as compost. So every single paper napkin, every single, you know, somebody like you had an apple core over there. So I'm looking at your apple core thinking, I wonder what he's going to do with that. You think I could take it home with me and put it in my compost bin? But the same thing happens, that you start going, okay, so this is compost, and you always have a second bag for trash, and you always have something else for recycling. So pretty soon you're doing that whole thing of compost, trash, recycling, and you start to understand what's the wide band, how do you get the trash into a smaller band, how do you, so it's this learning curve, and getting people into it so they can start figuring that out, I think, is one of the important things to do.
I'm gonna add one real quick.
Okay.
So I have a huge thing I've really wanted to have happen for a very long time, which really goes back into the whole learning curve piece of things. Schools do no longer teach people home ec classes. Hardly any of them do. You know what those classes do? They teach you when you grow up to be able to cook your own food. Right. They teach you to sew a button back on a shirt so you don't throw your shirt away because it doesn't have a button anymore. Those are if school is meant to prepare you for a life as an adult, that is a huge piece that is missing for people to grow up and be able to be a healthy, low waste adult. So,
okay, on that, a tremendous round of applause for our whole entire composting panel. Yay! So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the cast of the Theater of Public Policy up here for just 5 minutes, because there was so much recycling and composting and everything in between. So we're going to bring them back up here, and then we have a very special presentation that'll happen right after that. I promise we're not keeping you for lunch, because it's not even here yet. So, all right. So with that, hopefully the cast is they're getting their way up here. And with that, just like before, everything that the cast does is entirely unscripted. It's all made up. Everything is entirely improvised. Please, a big round of applause for the Theater of Public Policy.
Honey, I've added another bin.
Oh!
It's
wow.
We have recycling, compost, waste, and I've added a big bin for unexpected gifts for your spouse.
Oh, wow.
I want to incentivize, I've created a whole system.
Yes.
Just put unexpected gifts in.
Oh, you mean like this one?
Yes.
Do you want to unwrap it and then?
No, put it in the bin.
Oh.
Put it in the bin. I have a system.
Oh, okay. So you just accumulated stuff.
You now employed me.
Really?
How do you feel?
Yes.
It's hard.
Yes. But I don't really feel like this is something you can use. I mean, I know you like getting gifts from me, and I'm happy
happy to do that, but you have 87 teddy bears. And so I'm wondering, really, does this really equate to our love, or do you just want to fill this box? Whoa. Wow.
Excuse me, sir, I was looking to buy some dirt. I noticed you've got a few bags of it.
Yes.
Any suggestions you can make for dirt? I do live in the north central quadrant of Stillwater, so if that affects anything.
Excellent. Well, you know, this dirt was brought in fresh from North Minneapolis.
Ooh, I've heard so much about it.
Yes, it is really our best vintage dirt.
Oh, you have, what is it? It's April?
It's April dirt.
April dirt?
Yes, you will
Come
love
on.
this.
All right, let me grab the SUV. I will be right back.
Honey.
I'm sorry, yes. I'm sorry.
Honey, we have dirt in our backyard.
But this is vintage.
This is North Minneapolis dirt.
Yeah. I'm sorry, she doesn't understand.
I built those bins with my hands, and I've been turning them every
Oh, your
day.
cute little home eccy project. Oh, aren't you just a sweet?
Oh, that's adorable.
This Home Depot man knows everything. I'll grab the Jeep. Hold on one.
Hey, Mom, I had the best day at school. We got on the internet. We learned some new technology stuff. But I don't know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Where's the app for that?
Oh, you're adorable.
Yeah, but
You don't need to make your own food. You see, I just buy food. I get in my car and I drive to a window where a magical elf lives. They give us the food and I put it in the seat of my car. I never have a passenger.
so I never.
I wish that to be recyclable. I wish.
It's still here.
My name.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Maureen, and I make 14 trips a week to Target. I feel better already. I feel better already that I just said that.
My name is Sally, and I can't give up my Boom Chicka Pop bag.
Damn, I love that stuff.
God, I just put like 5 flavors.
Yes.
My name's-
Individually packaged.
My name's Dave. I started out by just composting a little in the backyard, and then I don't know what happened. Like by a month later, I was asking people if they were gonna eat their food scraps, and I was just hiding it away in the house. And then the other day, I went into a dumpster, and I stayed there for 2 hours getting all the old fruit.
Wow.
My name is Dave, and I'm a composter.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
is this recyclable?
I wish it were.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I can compost fast. We are gonna. I'm gonna turn the stage back over. Who all am I turning it back over to? Just you, or do you have a partner? Yes. Okay. So please, a big round of applause for the amazing co-founder and co-president of Eureka Recycling. Yay!
She's got the first part of what we're supposed to say, so you can I'll just stand here till she gets here. Here, yeah.
All right. So, okay, we're almost ready for lunch. We had something really special and really important to do before then. Eureka Recycling, part of the benefit of the business model that we have is we have this operation. We're incorporated as a nonprofit, so we can reinvest our proceeds into the community, into the advocacy work and events like this. And what we wanted to do is create an award that allows us to invest in advocates that we've been really inspired by, to honor the work that they've done and to invest in their continued education and inspiration and self-care and whatever they want to do with it, as long as they keep on keeping on. So that's the purpose behind Eureka's Momentum Award. This is the first annual. And Pat, please forgive us for reading this, but we have a lot to say and we don't want to forget any of it. But really, when we sat down to think about this, it was a no-brainer who our first recipient should be. Pat Schonecker is here with us today. I don't know if you want to come up here or if you want, yeah, come sit with us. We'll all sit. We'll all sit. Okay. So we will have the pleasure of all hearing more from Pat this afternoon as part of our conversation. But Kate and I and a lot of us at Eureka all met Pat on our own paths to zero waste over the years. Pat was one of the leaders really paving the way in this movement when we arrived. She started out by helping to oversee many, if not all, of the reuse and recycling and reduction programs at the NEC. And for those of you who know the history of Eureka, those were the programs that grew and grew and eventually spun off and became what's now Eureka Recycling. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Oh, sorry. So Pat's most recognized for her work around multifamily recycling. So that means apartment buildings. In most recycling programs across the country, it really only applies to people that live in single family homes, which means a large part of the population doesn't get access to even be able to recycle. And so Pat pioneered the multifamily apartment building recycling program in St. Paul many years ago. And it's still around. And it's been a real leader, the program, and what it's demonstrated across the country. And we still collect from all of those apartment buildings every day. And if you think about it in St. Paul, that's 40,000, 45,000 households that have access to recycling. That's a lot of people that wouldn't have access to that otherwise.
Okay, so some history. So Pat's concerns with social justice didn't start at multifamily recycling. As a very young person in the 60s, she worked as an AmeriCorps-ish volunteer, where she worked for the rights of migrant workers. Following that, she moved to a 100-person zero-waste eco-community that grew all their own food, wore only donated clothing, ran a reuse shop, and they housed guests from all around the world who lived there with them to learn about social justice and learn about co-op principles to take with them into their own work.
So as part of being at the NEC, not only was it the multifamily apartment building program, which is pretty remarkable in and of itself, but Pat worked to learn more about how to deal with toxins in public buildings, especially schools. And her work inspired a task force that rewrote the state cleaning products purchasing specifications, so how we decide and what we decide to buy to clean our buildings, and helped to create and pass the Parents' Right to Know Act, which requires schools to notify parents when, where, what, and the potential health impacts that will result when a school decides to apply pesticides, which is crazy that schools apply pesticides.
So Pat also then came back to help us at Eureka when we were looking at public space recycling and resource management contracts with colleges and institutions. I had the pleasure of being on her team for a lot of those projects and learned so much. And Pat has always lended a hand to Eureka and to the zero waste movement whenever we've put out the call. I feel like this is a lot of passing back and forth.
In front of Pat, passing back and forth. Pat also had the opportunity to set up and distribute countless grants to community groups working on reducing waste through the Dakota County and the entire Metro 9 County Solid Waste Board. And this work kept Pat in touch with dozens of local community boots on the ground efforts over several years that really made a difference. And this is where you will always find Pat showing up with community members who are trying to make a difference. Here, I'll pass behind.
There we go. So one of her latest and greatest projects, this gives you a real sense of the kind of mover and shaker that Pat is creating the Partnership Garden in Apple Valley, which is her hometown. So she's spent 2 years talking to churches and schools and businesses looking for land, getting lots of no's. Along the way, a lot of those presentations inspired individuals that heard her to start their own small gardens and community gardens, but she was really still looking for that big piece of land. And then she finally, it was the School of Environmental Studies in Apple Valley that she finally made a very passionate pitch to, and they took her up on it, and she got the land. Now she's got land for this garden and no money, no problem for Pat. So she wouldn't take any credit for it, but she gathered up all the right people to raise the right money, get the volunteers in place. This garden is set up on cooperative principles. Everybody who's part of it has ownership in it, and this is really a value that Pat has carried through all of her work and has benefited countless people in this community and beyond. I took your spot.
I'm going to say something here. I know this isn't my Sorry, I can't refrain, but the garden is called the Partnership Garden, and people thought it was a partnership with the school, and no, my intention was it's a partnership with nature, because for too long, in North America particularly, we've tried to subjugate nature to go our way instead of going nature's way, and so this was working with nature. And our garden is built in a circular path, and it's a permaculture garden. It's built at above ground. We wanted all the roots to be untouched. We've added bees, we've added fruit trees, and it's a little piece of paradise. It's tucked away in a spot on the grounds of the School of Environmental Studies. It means a lot to me, and I love the name.
Yeah. So you can really see that Pat takes all of her experiences and just builds on them and keeps this momentum going. And it was why it was so obvious that Pat should be the first recipient of our Momentum Award. So we want her to take this award and invest in herself, in education, in inspiration, in whatever it is, because the world really needs her.
I just want to thank everybody from Eureka for helping me do the work I've done. And there's a quote that I love from, I believe it's Howard Thurman. It's like, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what make you come alive, because that's what the world needs, is people who have come alive. And Eureka was a place where I could really, where my passion was, where I could come alive. And not only was it my work, but it was the work of a whole team. And I know this is part of my talk from later, but anyway, anybody who's like in the front row here, especially I want to thank Susan, because she's championed Eureka from day one, and it probably wouldn't be here if she hadn't intervened at the moment it did, and she saved us from, we lost our processing center, and another company was ready to take over the processing who didn't fit our belief structure, and Susan did fantastic work to make that transition possible. And she was the inspiration behind so much that we did for so many years, and Alex and Jackie and Martha. Martha was my office mate for all those years and had to put up with my nervousness about different things that I did. And Jackie was just a terrific help, just on a million things, and we actually, for a while, we lived together in Apple Valley and drove together to work. But kind of forgot what I was going to say here. I had such a long introduction, but here's the thing I was going to say, is that a lot of people like Martha and Jackie and people, well, Alex is still there, but people who've moved on from Eureka, they say one of the things they really, really miss is the sense of teamwork that we had. They feel like they'll never have it again. We had energy conservation workers and recycling. We had two separate departments, but we had one big lunchroom table that was built by one of our staff members, and we always had food on it. We had our lunches there. We had leftover food from meetings. People would bake something special for the group, and it just felt homey, and we shared stories about what we were working on, where it was difficult. And we were really a team. We helped cross the lines when other things needed to be done, like we ran the Bike Classic, we were hosts for the Bike Classic, we did neighborhood cleanups. The energy department would help us. We'd help the energy department go out and be kind of the receptionist for people who were coming to their workshops. It was just a fantastic place to work, and I think we'll all miss it. Jackie came in this morning and said, it makes me so nostalgic that I'm not still there. I mean, it's a wonderful place to work when you're working for something you love and you believe in, and you're working with a team that shares your values.
And I can speak for Eureka and say that you all really are still there. The legacy that everybody who's come through the doors and everybody in the community that contributes to the work and to the conversation. Eureka's a lot bigger than the small team that we have, and right, exactly. And Pat's a huge part of that. Thank you so much, Pat. I think it's time for lunch.